Yeah, welcome to further events in the celebration of women in old-time music. We're so happy that Alice Gerrard was able to join us for this weekend. Did anybody see her at DVX or the Bijou? That was great. So she's going to be in here. She's got a new book out, Custom Made Woman. We have copies for sale in the bookshop, or just walk up to Tim out there if you want to purchase one. I believe Alice is going to hang around a little bit after this talk, and we'll sign them if you'd like. So you can do that. There's a lot more going on today. After this, at around 1:30, we're going to be showing some films from Tennessee Archive of Moving Image and Sound. Video clips that only we have. Marie Cirillo shot some videos back in the 70s that we have. Some films from Highlander and community television. So that program will run about 40 minutes, and we'll start at 1:30. Then at 2:30, the Female Bob Dylan podcast is going to be in here, welcoming Dr. Jesse Wilkerson to do an episode on Hazel Dickens to record live. So that'll be fun. Then we're going to head over to the Laurel Theater. 6 o'clock, that kicks off. We've got 4 acts there tonight. Tomorrow at the Laurel, that's kind of like open community day. We're inviting people to bring your instrument for a jam. There's a fiddle workshop, butt dancing workshop, I think, or flatfoot. Anyway, it's going to be a big day, so come on out and bring your instrument. Yeah, we're so happy to be here and doing this. And everything I mentioned is free. And it's free because the Tennessee Arts Commission gave us a grant through the Knoxville Arts and Culture Alliance. Friends of the Knox County Public Library always support us and help us out with funding and programming. And the Bijou Theater last night were very gracious and invited us to use them. And of course the Laurel, a great partner, and WDBX at the Blue Plate Special. You might have noticed these on your seat. What this is a QR code so we can get some feedback about what you liked about this, how we might improve things, and give that all-important grant data delivered to them. So we really appreciate that. Okay, now, Alice is here with Emily Hillard, who is the folklorist at Berea College currently. Before that, she was a state folklorist for West Virginia. She has a book, Imagining Our Future?
Making Our Future.
Making Our Future. That's a collection of essays on different folklore topics. And of course, Alice probably needs no introduction, and we're going to find out more about her in this conversation. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, Alice, it's so nice to be here with you. I really loved your book, and it covers over 90 years of a very full life.
Well, maybe a little less.
So I was wondering if you could tell us about how you went about calling up some of these memories, and also how you corroborated some of the stories and fact-checked them with old friends.
Well, first of all, this isn't a new book. It's my only book. And will probably be my only book. But I had no intention of writing a book, so that wasn't something I was thinking about doing. But when I was living in Durham, a friend of mine who was head of the Duke Center for Documentary Studies at that time, in the 80s, 90s, in the 90s. Wait, when did I move there? 89. Yeah, okay. In the 90s. I asked me if I would teach a class there. They had a chair and they had some money to pay somebody who wasn't a folklorist or an academician, which was definitely not me. And they would just teach what they knew, that they had some field of expertise and would teach around that. And so after, like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. I can't. I didn't even graduate college. How am I going to teach a college class? But they kept talking at me, and so I finally gave in, and it was really fun. We had a pretty good time. And well, one thing they did was they let me bring in people from the outside to talk to the class. So, I would get I got Dick Spotswood to come down one time and talk about his record collecting, and I got a friend of mine from Ranger, West Virginia, to come over and talk about her activism in West Virginia and stuff like that. So that was really fun, and they would pay them, so that was good. And then also they have all this great equipment upstairs in the upstairs part of the center, and I could use that equipment. And they had digitizing equipment, and so I had been hauling around 35 millimeter negatives of photographs I'd taken for years, no attention to climate, and just kind of dragging around with me everywhere I went. And I said, well, maybe this is the time I should use their equipment to start digitizing these negatives. So I did. I'd come in after work and and on weekends and stuff and start doing that. And people would stop by occasionally and they'd see a photo on a computer screen and they'd say, oh, I like that photo, and oh, I like that one. I like that one. And then Tom Rankin, who was the head there at the time, said, Alice, you should do a book. And I was like, you must be kidding. Really? And he said, sure, you should. And I didn't say anything. I just was, but it stuck in the back of my brain. I thought, well, maybe it could just be a photo book with stories around the photo, not something else. And that made sense to me. So I said, well, I would do that. And then they said, no, you also have to write about yourself. And so that was really? Are you kidding? And so it was another 7 years went by. And when I left there anyway, they gave me a Nikon digitizer, so I got to take that home with me and start working at home digitizing the photos, which was great. And so it was there somewhere in the back of my mind. And as I thought about it and over periods of time, I finally said, well, maybe that would be a good idea to do this book. And so I decided to do it. And it was more fun than I thought it would be. But I had to, the memory, hey guys, Rich, is that you? Oh my God. Okay. So great. So I started in, and I decided to attack it from the point of view of kind of like a scrapbook and not have it be an autobiography. That just turned me off completely. And so I picked pieces of my life that were like chapters in my life, like making the movie Sprout Wings and Fly with Les Blank. That was fun. And then it was one of them. And then I had a chapter on Hazel Dickens, and then a chapter on a sort of an introductory chapter about how I came to get into music and kids and all this kind of stuff. Parenting, or maybe they would call it non-parenting. And that's how I approached it. And it was, I didn't keep a journal or a diary or anything down through the years. Occasionally I'd write something down and occasionally I'd find one of those things and it would help me when I tried to remember, for example, the name of the miners club in Wales that we played at that time. I wouldn't have remembered that for the world, but I found it, and in a little thing I'd written. So there was help, and I called people. I'd call Paul Brown, and I'd talk to Andy Kahn. Am I remembering this right? And people would help me out, and they gave me the name of somebody that I might need to talk to, and on and on and on like this. So that's how I sort of approached it, and went through it that way.
Well, you're a really wonderful storyteller, and it's very there's some really great vignettes, and maybe we'll get into a few of those. And the photos are incredible as well. But Going back to how you first got interested in music, so you had a pretty different experience of the folk revival than some of the young people at the time experienced, and you weren't in Greenwich Village, you were in DC, and you talk about being much more interested in the traditional music and Harry Smith's anthology of American folk music. And so I was wondering if you could talk about getting into traditional music and finding your way in it.
Well, the first thing that really blew my mind was the first time I heard the Harry Smith anthology of American folk music. Are you guys familiar with that at all? If you aren't, you should be. And there was this kind of eccentric guy from New York City who was a collector, is my understanding now, of old commercial 78s. And he compiled a lot of these into, how many LPs was it? 4? 6 LPs of, and it would be ballads, dance music, he categorized it like that. And it would be everything, blues, and he had everything on there, Cajun music. He had, it was just all there. And it was all what I would call traditional music, but it had been commercially recorded. And, just a side issue here, because as a folklorist, you might appreciate this. I feel like, we're always trying to define what is old-time music, what is bluegrass music, how are they different? The folk music, bluegrass, old-time, traditional, source music, and it just drives me crazy because it's like the judge said, and I'm quoting somebody else on this. It was a pornography case, and the judge said, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. And that's kind of how I feel about this music, And so I think we leave the definitions up to the folklorists. That's their job.
Oh, no.
So, but yeah, so it was, there weren't such strict delineations, I think, I remember at the Galax Fiddlers Convention years ago, they didn't have they didn't differentiate between bluegrass banjo and old-time clawhammer banjo. It just was banjo contest. And then eventually it got, you had to do one or the other. And you got judged on those things. But so, where was I? So I heard that Harry Smith anthology. And then, and I was also meeting people who, well, this was when I was at Antioch College. So I went to Antioch, and right away there, I was seeing people playing guitars, sitting around under the trees and playing guitars, and they didn't have music in front of them. When I was a kid, my mom tried to get me to learn to play the piano, and you always had to have music up there. And I saw these people playing, and they weren't looking at any music. They just were playing, and looking at one another, and that was pretty cool. And so I decided as I was meeting more and more people who were playing some guitars and stuff like that, I was thinking I'd like to try to learn guitar myself. So I taught myself as as everybody does in communities. Excuse me, it's early morning, can't you tell? But so I started the Harry Smith, okay, and then the people I knew around then, like I knew Mike Seeger, my boyfriend at the time, Jeremy Foster, was a friend of Mike's, so I met Mike. They went to high school together. Then I met Hazel through Mike. Then I met, this person, that person, and it just happened that this movement was happening among us, sort of younger, middle-class kids, New York, DC, I don't care what it was, California. They were starting to hear this music and try to play it. and learn it. And finding other people who played it and learned it, were learning it. And also, because so many people from the South had moved up north to get work around Baltimore in particular, there were a lot of Southern country people up there working in factories, and like Hazel Dickens, who with her whole family had moved up to Baltimore back when. And it was kind of a small world, really. And you got to know one another. And so you could gather together, and it was a kind of a community. And, music can create community very well. And but the ones who were more interested in the stuff in the Harry Smith anthology, or listening to somebody, Hazel sing, or maybe Texas Gladden on her recording of One Morning in May, which is so beautiful. You love that. I love that. There's something so gritty and real about that kind of singing, as opposed to what was happening in folk music. John Jacob Niles, Susan Reed, and then a little later Joan, and others. It was more of didn't have the grit, and I love that gritty sound in this music. And so I was, and a bunch of us, we were very attracted to that whole thing, and it was around, and it was in New York. Like John Cohen lived there, Jody Stecker, David Grisman, they all were New Yorkers who came down to hang out. And then in D.C., it was Pete Kuykendall, Dick Spotswood, John Duffy. All those people were kind of the middle-class bunch who were learning bluegrass music in their case. And so that's where I was coming from. And that's what I wanted to, that's the kind of music I wanted to try to play and sing.
Let's talk about meeting Hazel, and if you could share some of your favorite memories of Hazel. You have some good ones in the book.
Well, okay, I met Hazel. Well, my husband, Jeremy, said before we moved, we were at Antioch, and before we moved back to D.C., he said, there's this little girl, and she's got a great big, little skinny girl, I think he said, she's got a great big voice, and you got to hear her sing. And that he was talking about Hazel, because he had met Hazel. So eventually, because we all met, we became, and we were kind of like a gang. Every Sunday, we'd pack the van up and go up to the country music parks like Sunset Park and New River Ranch, and others down in Virginia like Watermelon Park. And we'd go, they'd have music all afternoon on Sunday afternoon. In the ones in Pennsylvania, Sunset, the Amish people would come, and they'd bring their horses and buggies. They had place for the horses and buggies to park and the cars. And it was all very informal, and touring musicians would stop and play there as part of on their tour. They'd play the Opry maybe Saturday night. They'd drive all night, come up and play Sunset Park the next afternoon on Sunday. And, you'd bring a picnic, and you'd get together, and you'd invite the musicians to sit down and have, food with you. And they would, you'd talk about how their families were getting along, and did their mama recover from whatever she had, and blah, blah, blah. So it was very informal. It's not like it is now, fences, $25 seats here. It's just different. And there were planks on cinder blocks where you sat, and a rudimentary stage, maybe one microphone back in the days, one mic where you moved in and out. And so it was just a great thing. And they are no more, I don't think. from what I hear. But am I straying from what you asked me?
Yeah, I was asking about Hazel, but there
Oh,
is.
Hazel, right.
You do talk about her fried chicken and her deviled eggs and her potato salad that she would pack
I'm
in
the
the
deviled
picnic.
egg
Oh,
queen,
you're
huh?
the deviled egg queen. Okay, let's set the record straight.
Yeah, she made some good fried chicken. Yeah, so we make a big picnic to take up, and that when we had picnic tables, the kids, they could just run, just let them run around. They weren't very far from somebody's eyes, as long as they didn't get on the unbelievably rickety little Ferris wheel they had at the corner of the park. But yeah, so we talk a lot to musicians. They were hadn't probably had a good home cooked meal, touring in a while. So they enjoyed sitting down, talking, and it was just kind of like a nice afternoon with Bill Monroe, or a nice afternoon with the Stanley Brothers, or Wilma Lee Cooper, or somebody like that. And it is no more.
Yeah.
But it was really fun. And so Hazel, she came from West Virginia. She was one of 11 kids, if I remember. She was a really good singer. She played a little guitar and she played a little bass. And so she came up, and we got to be friends through Mike, because Mike was working at a TB sanatorium for his conscientious objector stint. And it was just outside of Baltimore, and it just turned out that one of Hazel's brothers was a patient there. And Mike, as I've heard it, Mike would sit around and diddle around his mandolin on time off and stuff. And Hazel's brother heard him playing and came down and said, "Oh, I've got a sister. You should meet her. She's a really good singer." And he was, I guess he went home soon after that, and he invited Mike to come home and have dinner with him one night. And Hazel was there. And she she was very suspicious of Mike. I mean, she didn't trust people very much. You move from your home in Bluefield, West Virginia, or wherever, and you come up to Baltimore, and a lot of times people make fun of you. They'll make fun of your accent. Hazel remembered this very small thing, but she remembered it. And it was somebody making fun of her for saying pop instead of soda. And that stuck with her. And so she wasn't friendly right away. She had to get to trust you. And but she was so funny. I mean, she had a great sense of humor. And I don't know, there's lots. And she was great. She loved my kids, and yeah. I'm trying to think of stories. There are so many, but
You write one about the women working sign.
oh yeah. We were on a tour once, and so we were going through some part of the road that was being worked on, and they had these men working signs all over the place. And she said, "Hey, you don't see any signs, see any of them signs that say women working, do you?" And then one time she wrapped a Christmas present or something for us in paper, and she pasted all over the paper, these little things that she'd clipped out from newspapers. I don't know. Do I have a
I think
picture in
there's
there?
one on the book that says "Women on the Way." Men are not accustomed to assertive women with
Yeah.
strong opinions and fundable talents.
Yeah. She cut out those things from and pasted them all over I kept that paper. I don't remember what was in it, but I kept the paper. Yeah, she was funny. She was quick she had really quick wit. And she'd come back. You daren't, if you don't want to come back from Hazel. Oh gosh, she was something. Yeah. So we were, and we just were hanging around in the same crowd. We weren't singing together for a long time. I was listening to her though. And then finally we were at some party, which there was parties everywhere all the time. That's all we did was play music. and we'd get together, and there'd be, different people with banjos, and they'd take turns playing. We'd have a little band. We'd set up. It was the Bill Clifton song back then. Do you guys know what that was? Bill Clifton. No? He's 95 now. He was a musician. He came from Towson, Maryland, and played professionally for a long time. But anyway, he had this songbook that was like the Bible for a lot of people back in the day. Just had the words to all these common songs that were, and we always had that up on the rack, and then a few other things. And we'd be singing, and playing, and at some point somebody suggested, why don't you and Hazel sing a song together? And I guess we did. I don't remember. It wasn't like I remember the moment in time, but it just sort of happened. And then we started doing more of it at parties, and then eventually at one party, there was, we were having a party near D.C., and David Grisman and Peter Siegel had come down from New York to go to a bluegrass festival, and it got rained out, so they came to the party. Word gets around about those parties, like it will. And then Peter heard Hazel and I singing together, and he said, "Oh my God, you guys sound great. You should do a record." And then so he sort of got after us about it, and we decided to do that. Yeah, it was the first one. Yeah,
For Folkways.
for Folkways, yeah.
Well, I was hoping you could talk about the Southern Folk Cultural Revival Project. That was really the first integrated tour of musicians through the South. That was started by Bernice Johnson Reagan and Anne Romaine, and I know you and Hazel were on the tour. Rich was maybe there as well.
Rich Kirby.
And so I was
Jack
wondering
Wright.
if you could talk about your experience on that tour and what you think the impact that it had both for the audience, but also for you as participants.
Well, okay, so first of all, I think back on the people who were on that tour, and it's just like an encyclopedia of amazing musicians. The whole premise of the tour was that Anne and Bernice were working in Atlanta in the 60s with the civil rights movement there. And during this time of discovery, a lot of young people from New York and D.C., they had listened to the Harry Smith anthology, and they were discovering that a lot of these people that they were idolizing on record still were alive and living at home in the South, in their homes. And so they started going down and looking for them. That's how Mississippi John Hurt got discovered. But they brought them, and they, so they'd go visit them, they'd record them, they'd talk them into performing again, like Doc Boggs was one of those, and they'd take them up north to festivals like Newport, Philadelphia Folk Festival, New York Friends of Old Time Music, places like that. And so they were always playing away from home. And so I think Anne and Bernice were thinking, wouldn't it be good to have a tour of black and white musicians going around the South and speaking to the struggles of working class people? And just by their very presence, when Roscoe Holcomb gets up there and talks about how strip mining poisoned his well, and he talks about working on the railroad and breaking his back, you take one look at him and hear him sing, and that's real. And so that was kind of the thing that trying to do, and it went on for quite a long time. Bernice eventually quit doing the tour because she got a job with the Smithsonian, I think that. But Anne kept doing it up until she died, when she had appendicitis and didn't get it in time, and she died from appendicitis. No health insurance. Terrible. So, but the people, I could start. I'll start. Stop me when you get bored. Elizabeth Cotton, Doc Boggs, Roscoe Holcomb, Ralph Stanley, the Balfour Brothers, Martha Carson, Olabelle Reed, Hazel and me. Did I say Elizabeth Cotton? Johnny Shines. I I don't remember Brownie being on it. He might, sometimes a musician would jump in at a certain place we were playing as sort of a guest for that one concert. They might live in the area, something like that. But, um, and so, yeah, but, and more. There, I think Anne's papers are all at UNC,
Yeah.
Chapel Hill, and anybody can go in and look at this collection. But if you really want to know, but this is this. Oh, Bessie Jones, and so it was a lot of fun. It was very it was an experience for me that I had never had. Going into the South from this perspective. Um, you kind of, I read Night Comes to the Cumberlands. Have you ever read that book? You've got to read that book. Yeah, it's a wonderful book. Anyways, I read that, and that got me all riled up. And then, you were traveling in places where people were very poor, a lot of them. And they welcomed, I remember especially one of the great places we used to go a lot was Blackie, Kentucky. You remember Blackie, Rich? Yeah. And there was a fellow there by the name of Joe Begley, who was very activist. He was from around there, and he and his wife ran the general store that her father had owned. And he was working, and it was strip mining was the big issue back then, more so than mountaintop removal now. But he would work. He was very activist, and he was always doing something. He'd go to Washington to talk about the problems, and he'd come back. And so he was there, and he always wanted us to come and do workshops there, and we always did. And so that was that, and where was the bread and chicken house? Was that in Pound? Big Stone. Okay. Yeah, that was another good. I remember with Doc Boggs, remember how you go over it was the dry county, the wet county, the dry county. And so we'd be in a dry county, we'd get just up to the crest where the wet county began. Doc would have to stop and get his bottle of liquor and then come back, and then Elizabeth Cotton would carry it for him. Oh, God. Anyway, so, and it was, we didn't have cars chasing us and shooting at us with guns or anything like that. What we were very aware of was, we'd go into restaurants, stuff like that. We sat together. And occasionally, and if ever one of the black performers felt funny about stopping at a particular place and just kind of like, I don't know, we shouldn't probably stop here, we would do that. We would pay attention to that. So there was, there's a lot going on. There was a black blues player from New York, Larry Johnson, maybe. Were you on that tour? He was a blues player from New York. He had been born in the South, but at a very young age had gone to live with his grandmother in New York. So this was his first time back in the South since he had left, and he was maybe in his mid-20s, something like that. And he was freaked out. I mean, he was so freaked by being there and just so worried about what was going to happen, and he was just really nervous about it all the time. And it was really a sight to see. I mean, he just, and you had to really cut him some slack because he'd sometimes get mad at the wrong people in the car, and, because he was so afraid that something was going to happen. And that was, you begin to look at things differently. And so, and I think it was a new experience for me doing that. And with Hazel, I think, just being part of that tour sort of gave her permission as a shy person to speak out, and she spoke out in song about her feelings about stuff. So I think that's how it affected her to some degree. And I'm just armchair psychoanalyzing here, but whatever. She can't deny it now. Oh, Lord.
Well, I really like what you wrote in the book. Year after year, we'd crowd into the van and chase after a better world.
Yeah. It was a van. It was, oh, I'll never forget going to Kentucky on Halloween night. Oh, my Lord. So there weren't inners. It was like, and so there we were. It was dark. We were going this little road to somewhere, and we'd hear these people off in the woods laughing and yelling, and then we'd come upon a tree down in the road, and we'd have to stop, and we couldn't get past. But then all of a sudden, here comes a state trooper. He has a chainsaw in the back of his trunk, so he cuts the log up. And then we go on to the next log in the tree, goes in front of us. And this was Halloween night in eastern Kentucky. But one night, they were having a big time throwing trees in the road.
So later you moved to the Galax area, and you do a lot of field work at that time. And so I was interested in those fieldwork visits that you do with Andy Kahn. And you talk about the ways that it was different for the two of you because of gender, and the ways that you would work to make sure that, because you were mostly learning from male musicians and making sure that their wives felt comfortable having you around. And because of that, you did some recipe collecting and some other kinds of fieldwork collecting with some of the women that you met. So could you talk about those experiences?
Well, they were varied. I mean, I wouldn't say all the time that if it was a couple that the wife felt neglected or whatever, but you could sense if there was any kind of feeling about, it was not atypical for the guys to gather in a room and start picking, and so the wife would be in the kitchen. I'd go talk, and it was always fun talking. And I did get some recipes from people, and I used them one time in a fundraiser for the Old Time Herald thing. We'll send you Elizabeth Cotton's chicken and dumplings recipe, Lena Hughes' dill pickle recipe.
Can you share those with us, please?
Not right now.
I mean, later. But I would love to make Libba's
Would you?
chicken and dumplings.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was the best. And so it was like that. But yeah, but it could have been, it was often a single man. I mean, Tommy his wife had died, and he didn't have any responsibilities. Because a lot of, it wasn't atypical for men who played music to quit playing while they had their family and then come back to it when the kids were grown. You heard that a lot. And so that was Gerald's situation. He lived by himself. Luther Davis up in Galax lived by himself. Bertie Mae Dickens, now she was a banjo player that lived near Sparta, between Galax and Sparta. And her husband, oh, he was a lovely man, Marvin and Bertie Mae. And Bertie, she was this little, I probably have a picture of her in the book somewhere. She was a small woman. She always wore a little house dress with a pinafore type apron thing over it. She had her hair in a hairnet. She was totally done up, she was not just, she always was neat so deceptively frail. But she had this huge resonator banjo that she played. She couldn't even lift it. So we'd go over there, and Marvin, her husband, would have to get it out, or somebody would have to get it out from the bed and put it in her lap. And she was a wonderful banjo player, very, not at all like the more maybe, I mean, she wasn't like Tommy or other. She was just very elegant style of playing the banjo, and she loved to play, and we did that. So there were women that played, and I'm trying to think of others around. Oh well, there was Mabel Crockett. Mabel Crockett was an African American woman who, when Luther Davis got sick and he couldn't get around because his feet were bad because of something, I don't remember what, some kind of, he couldn't get around easily, and so his family hired Mabel Crockett to come in and kind of cook for him for a while until he got better, and she loved to sing. She was a great singer. And so, and they were constantly trying to do stuff together, and she called him Brother Luther. And she'd say, Brother Luther, let's try this hymn, and she'd start singing. She has a beautiful voice. So she'd just start singing, and he'd just start playing on his fiddle. He was an old-time fiddler, and he was 93 or something. So he wasn't sounding like, who? Tex Logan?
Tatiana Hargraves.
Yeah, Tatiana. But he's a great fiddler. We all loved him. And so they'd start, and she'd be singing in one key, he'd be playing in another one. And I have tapes to prove it. But it was just, she had a beautiful voice, and I wish I'd been able to get some of just her singing, but it was wonderful. But yeah, so I think that there weren't, generally speaking, during the time Hazel and I were trying to kind of get something together, there were not as many solo women professionally playing, like people like, well, the Carter family, who was a family band, really. That's a different thing. And then AP traveled with them a lot. But or Wilma Lee, you had the family bands Wilma Lee, who was really the leader of that band. It was Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper. Stoney was her husband, and he was a fiddler, and she played guitar and banjo, and great singer. And she was really the leader of the pack. But she was covered by the fact that her husband was traveling with her in certain ways. So there was that, but you didn't find too many people like Cousin Emmy, who traveled by herself and was a professional musician and had kind of a hard time often because she was a woman working alone. And so there were, and people like Molly O'Day, her husband played with her a lot. So it was interesting. There weren't so many professional women musicians just doing stuff. And in the non-professional area, there were lots of women who played. Everywhere you'd go, you'd hear somebody talk about, well, my sister plays the banjo, or but they don't play out. And part of that reason, I think, is that playing out was usually at dances locally. You played at every town around there had a Friday night dance, and sometimes a Saturday night dance. And with local musicians, it was always men. And I think that part of it was the dances could be rough places. Tommy told me about the time he got cut in the neck. Somebody knifed him across the neck at a dance. And it wasn't uncommon to have fights break out. And I think they just didn't go there. Women were not. It wasn't that they weren't allowed, but they just didn't go. Who wants to go to a knife fight if you don't have to? And but they were around, and if you could hear about them and go talk to them, like there was a woman who played the guitar, who lived in another county over, who used to come and play with Bert a lot. The two of them would play banjo and guitar, and just you could always find people, but it wasn't a huge number. But I don't know. Traditionally, women have been ballad carriers, but they also played musical instruments, fiddles, banjos, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my favorite parts of the book when you talk about these, some of these non-professional women musicians who you learn from, and you say, I'm not talking about professional women players and singers like Lily Mae Ludford, the Carter family, Cousin Emmy, Molly O'Day, and the like. I'm talking about the countless women hidden away in small communities, working at home, on the farm, or sometimes the factory, women whom we may never hear about except that someone you talk to speaks of them and remembers them.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure we have time for people to ask questions, and there's a lot more I could ask about, but I do want to ask about something more contemporary. So one of your most recent claims to fame in my book is that you taught your dog to bring you a beer from the fridge. This was like your pandemic project. And
Yeah,
so
kind of.
I was wondering, one, how you did that, and two, if there's any crossover skills with like dog training and being a good musician or a magazine publisher or many of the, other roles you've had in life.
Well, first of all, I've always had a dog in my life ever since I can remember. We had a family dog always. And then for a while I didn't when I was touring with Tom and Brad because we were doing a lot of touring and one dog had died and I didn't want to get another one. So anyway, but I love my dogs. And so let's see. What did you ask me?
How you taught the dog to do
the
this.
beer thing. Okay. It's on YouTube if anybody doesn't know.
I highly recommend looking at the video.
Here's the thing. Okay, so wasn't my idea. A friend of mine, Peter McLaughlin, who's a musician, lives out west, taught his dog to bring him a beer. And so that was in my head, and I thought, oh shoot, I could do that with Polly. So so we sat in and started doing it, and I taught her in stages, I put a thing around the refrigerator door. It wasn't like these modern refrigerators that they're hard to get open because they're so magnetized or whatever. But, she could pull on it and open it. So she knew tug, so tug, oh, the thing. Oh, good. Okay, now put the beer in the refrigerator, in a koozie, of course, because you don't want the...
That was one of my questions. Yeah. You don't want the dog shotgunning a beer.
But I think I did the beer outside of the refrigerator first. Said, here's the beer. This is a beer. Don't confuse them with too many words. Here's the beer. Bring me the beer. So she'd get it and bring it to me. She knew that. She knew bring me some. And then I'd put it in the refrigerator. And then I'd leave the door open, bring it. And then I'd close the door. And then just one thing from another. And then finally, so then she goes, opens the door, gets the beer, brings it to me, and then she has to close the refrigerator door. So she goes, and the best thing about this video that I love, she goes and bangs on and all the things that are hanging on the refrigerator door fall off, and she closes the door. But in this little video I did for that one you're saying, she bangs it and then looks at me, but it doesn't go all the way closed. And so I look at her, and she looks back at the fridge, and then she goes and she hits it again and closes it. And then I taught her how to recycle.
That's amazing.
Oh, well. It was covered.
Well, that is an incredible feat to add to your long list of talents and skills. So.
It's my pride.
Well, I think we can open it to questions from the audience now. If anyone has a question. Eric?
I'm wondering if you could share some memories or anecdotes of your time at the Folklife Festival, the 1982 World's Fair.
Oh, that was a great festival. Ralph Rinsler, who was an old friend of mine, was working. He had come down to D.C. to work with Jim Morris on starting a folklife festival at the Smithsonian. And I'll never forget the first one. It was completely unannounced, but we knew it was going to happen. I think it was Ed Young and the Mississippi Fife and Drum Band or somebody was there. And they were going to open the festival, so we went down, and all of a sudden, here comes the Fife and Drum Band, and they're kind of snaking along on the mall. It was on the mall. And there were people, they were going to work, they were around, and they started following this group. And that was the first thing I remember about the first time of that festival. But that festival has been going it's a week long, I think, or is it 2 weeks now? I can't remember, but it was in July. It was really hot, but it was on the mall, and each year they'd feature a different state. And they had Nimrod Workman up there one time. He was he was from an old coal miner from, he lived in West Virginia and Kentucky, so I don't know either. But he was up there. He was a singer. He wrote some songs that he sang, and he sang others. He didn't play an instrument. And so he was up there, and they would house performers with other performers in college dormitories and things like this. And inevitably, there was usually a party at some point in the evening after the festival closed down. So one season, they had some break dancers from downtown D.C. at the festival doing their stuff. And then they had Nimrod at the same time. And Nimrod was staying in this hotel with these young kids. And so there was a party, and the kids are out there just dancing away. And here comes Nimrod, and he did this thing called what was it? The crab walk. And where he gets, this is a guy who must have been in his 80s at the time. And he crouches down, grabs his ankles. Can you demonstrate it?
He somehow got his feet in front of his shoulders.
Yeah, his feet in front of his shoulders, and just sort of crab walks across. And he started doing this across the dance floor where these kids were dancing. They just stopped dancing. You have never seen so many jaws drop in your life. And they just thought it was so great, and it was like he was a hero. He did that. Oh my God! It was the mix of people. Usually was really fun. Yeah.
How about at the World's Fair here in Knoxville?
Oh yeah. Was that 83? 82. Yeah, I think Andy and I came with Tommy Gerrard, but there were lots of other people here too. But who? Yeah, they were probably here, yeah. Lois Short was here.
She was with you on that.
Huh?
Your name and hers are listed there. Who is Lois?
Well, I didn't know Lois. We weren't with Lois, but we were here at the same time. We were here to accompany Tommy Gerrard. And so I played guitar, and Andy played banjo, and he played fiddle. I guess he played banjo too sometimes. But yeah, Lois Short, she was a singer, and maybe somebody else knows more about Lois. I think you know where she was from or anything?
Eastern Kentucky.
Was she from Eastern Kentucky?
Harlan
Okay.
County.
Harlan? Okay. Yeah. And so there were a lot of people here, including Hamper McBee. Hamper McBee made liquor. And so he had a still set up at the World's Fair. And he was living in the same house that Tommy and Andy and I were in, along with an Irish fiddler whose name I don't remember.
Nick Maloney. Eugene O'Donnell. Nick Maloney.
Mixed
It wasn't Mick, but somebody else. I just can't remember his name, yeah. But great fiddle player. And also Roland White, the mandolin player, was staying there. And so, and Hamper, after he'd quit and come back, he'd bring, a little liquor with him back to this house. And so there'd be a little jam session, Tommy and this Irish fiddler and Roland White, it would all be playing, jamming together, and it was just really great. Yeah, I remember it. And one time we were getting tired of the food at the fair, So we just decided to go try to find a Chinese restaurant somewhere. And Tommy, had a very little diet. He ate beans and fat meat and potatoes and stuff like that, but he wasn't an adventurous eater. So, but he said he'd go with us, and we figured maybe we could find something he could eat. I knew he wouldn't eat spare ribs because he said that he knows that in China, Chinese restaurant we were going to, they eat dogs. So he didn't want to eat spare ribs, have any of those. And so we just went, and it was kind of early, before I think we were the only people there besides the waiter. So and I think, well, maybe dumplings, maybe he did the dumplings. So we ordered some dumplings, and he brought the dumplings and the various sauces for the dumplings, and then he kind of looks at it. He says, "Hey, buddy," he calls away, "Buddy, come on over here." He says, "Do you have any light bread?" And I explained to the waiter, he was talking about white bread. The waiter said, "No, I'll go out and get some, though." So he goes out of the restaurant, comes back with a loaf of white bread, puts it on the table, and Tommy just sits there sopping up that duck sauce and everything with his white bread. That was our restaurant. Oh, God, I'll never forget it. It was great. Many a laugh, many a good time.
Other question?
Could you just tell us a little bit about what Elizabeth Cotton was like as a person?
She was an amazing person. I knew her quite well. She lived in D.C. when I was living there. Sometimes we would be on a tour together. I did a lot of interviewing of her for something I was writing, an article I was writing. So I went over to her house a lot, and we just talk and tape it and this kind of stuff. And one of the things she talked about, and all these tapes are in the Southern Folk Life collection too, but she worked for people. She was a domestic, whatever, and that's how she met Mike. She worked for the Seegers, and but that was how she and her daughter Lily made a living, was working for other people, and so she would, and sometimes she would talk about those people. It would be, sometimes they were nice and sometimes they weren't. And she just laid on the line about, I'd come in, it was raining out, I took the bus, didn't even offer me a cup of coffee and stuff like that, or she'd mimic them, telling her, "Now, Elizabeth, you just wash every one of those slats on the blinds, make sure you get them clean. And I think it'll take you about 20 minutes. So she shouldn't take more than 20 minutes. Or whatever. But yeah, anyway, so she was great. She was very, she was really tuned in to what was going on around her. She'd look at people, we had to wait at an airport or something, she'd watch people very carefully. And, and she'd tell stories about, she told a story about her grandmother, when they had old plank road, planks on the road, and it was, I guess, just after the Civil War or something like it, and her grandmother told her about horses coming in, galloping on these planks coming in from Union armies. And then also she sang a song that her grandmother sang a piece of it. She didn't really remember all of it, but it was something about down in Georgia, way down in Georgia, there's a man burning on a log. That was something her grandmother sang something to her about that. So that's, yeah. And she liked to talk, and it was really nice sitting down and talking with her. She was a wonderful, very, very, she was another elegant woman. I mean, she held herself, she was elegant. And there was a time we came through customs in Canada. It was Hazel and I, we were coming back on the same plane because all of us were coming to D.C. So we were kind of in charge of Elizabeth. And we get to the customs thing where you have to declare. And so Lib is in front of me, and I hear the guy say, "Do you have anything to declare?" And she said, "What?" And he said, "Did you buy something and you need to tell us about it?" She said, "Well, I got a little piece of pie, but it wasn't much." But she was a trooper, too. She really was.
So who funded that tour through the South?
We didn't really have funding for it. I mean, they'd get on the phone. They had a lot of connections, with university stuff, especially Bernice, and in the movement. So I think they just, and we didn't get paid. It wasn't like, we weren't getting paid a lot. I have letters. There's one, "Doc, can you come for a week?" She's writing, and we wrote. No cell phones, no internet. Write a letter to Doc Boggs. "Hey, Doc, if we can pick you up in somewhere and you can come, could you come and stay for a week? And it'd be $300, and we'll find places to stay." And that's what it was. It was just not a lot of money. But then I think she formed as a 501c3 at some point. Maybe that's when it became the Southern Folk Cultural Revival Project Incorporated. And probably worked on getting grants. But she wasn't, I wouldn't say Anne was a big fundraiser. Bernice probably would have been better, but she was off the board by that time. So it was always underfunded. And so it was, but people went because they believed in it. Should I tell a Johnny Shine story? I'll tell you one story. I think I put it in the book. But we were on the tour, and we were somewhere, I don't know, it's Charleston or I forget where it was exactly, in the South, some city. And the van had broken down, which it often did, and we were spending the night. And Johnny Shines was on this particular tour. Johnny Shines, do you know who he was? Yes. Blues player. And Anne and I had gone out, and Anne was this little, small woman, maybe 5'1", something like that. And she had long blonde hair, big blue eyes, very disarming, and a heavy Southern accent. So we went out looking for some food. Well, the rest of them stayed back at the motel. And so we found this place. It was kind of empty. Nobody was there. The bartender came out from the back. He said, "Could we get something to eat?" He said, "Sure, I'll make you a sandwich." Then he went back in the kitchen. And just about then, Johnny Shines comes walking up the sidewalk. And he sees us in there. We're waving at him. "Come on, Johnny." And so he comes in. And then the bartender guy comes out again. He says, and I said, "This is our friend John. He would like something to eat too." And the bartender said, "Well, yeah, I could make him something to eat, but he'll have to take it out." And then Anne gets up. She's little. She walks up to this big beefy guy. Her hair's down here. She's shaking her finger in his face. "You son of a bitch. Yeah, that's against the law. I'll have the law in your ass so fast you won't know what happened to you." And he lifted his broom up and was like he was coming. And at that point, Johnny said, "Let's get out of here," because he knew the first thing that would happen was he'd be accused of doing something if the law came. So we left. And I don't know whether, she did call, but I don't know if anything happened. Because it was a state bureau that she would have to go in Georgia or whatever it was.
I think we can do one more question.
thing. My family was in a traveling bluegrass group, and I've heard stories about, like you mentioned, everybody piled into the van.
Yeah.
And when you have all the instruments, and he played bass, so that took up a lot of room in and of itself. But they were also couch surfers as well. And
Yeah.
I've heard stories about sleeping on front porches and living room floors, and my aunt slept in a bathtub.
Oh, my God,
Was
yeah.
there anywhere you couch surfed, or what was the most uncomfortable?
Oh. I don't remember anything that bad, but we did stay with people.
You stayed at my house. Yeah, several times the tour stayed. I lived in Nashville with maybe some other people who were in this room.
Oh, that's, yeah, Anne lived in Nashville, yeah. Okay. Oh, thank you. I don't know if I was there.
Communal house, and there were always.
Yeah. But we did, like, we stayed with people, so, you know, sometimes we'd have to share a bed. Like, I shared a bed with Libba one night, and she kept me awake all night snoring. But anyway, so, yeah, I mean, we were always trying to save money. And we did stay in motels sometimes, but I think we stayed with people a lot. But I don't think we would let anybody sleep on a couch. 'Cause, okay, yeah, okay.
Well, I think we're pretty much out of time, but I think Alice is going to sign books, so if you have other questions, you could ask after. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. It's truly an honor to talk with you.
Thank you so much. That's great.
And I would just say that this book is a real gift. I highly recommend it. And yeah, you should be very proud. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm pleased you like it.